I want you to take a second and think about the very first thing you did when you woke up today. For the average person, the answer is predictable. You reached for your phone. In fact, research shows that 80% of smartphone users check their phones within 15 minutes of waking up. Before your feet even hit the floor, you've invited the opinions, the tragedies, and the demands of the entire world into your psyche. You're not starting your day, but you're reacting to someone else's. I'm Corey Kennard, and I welcome you to today's episode that I call Clean Up in Aisle 1. Now, let's grow. Before we get started, I want to let you know that this episode is presented in partnership with the No Negative Energy Life brand, a life coaching resource and media edutainment outlet, where we help human beings to consciously bring to the surface and ultimately eradicate the impact of negative thoughts and intentionally replace them with healthy ways of living that will increase one's ability to thrive. Check us out at nonegative.energy. That's no negative, all one phrase, .energy. Today, we're going to talk about becoming the architect of your life rather than the janitor of your distractions. We're going to discuss why setting the tone isn't a cliche, but it's a biological and psychological necessity for a life of purpose. Now, we often tell ourselves that checking an email or scrolling through social media for just 5 minutes is harmless. My friends, science disagrees with this. A famous study from the University of California, Irvine, found that it takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to get back to a state of deep focus after a single interruption. You see, when you switch from a meaningful task to an unimportant notification, a part of your brain stays stuck on the previous distraction. You are operating with a divided brain for the rest of the morning. Now imagine your brain is a high-performance engine. Every time you stop to check a meaningless like or a trivial news headline, you're slamming on the brakes. You're burning fuel. You're wearing out the pads, and you're getting nowhere fast. So let's look at the power of the first hour. There's a concept in psychology called primary effect. It suggests that the first things we experience in a sequence have a disproportionate impact on our memory and our mood. I want to share a story with you about a man named Jerry. Now, Jerry was a mid-level executive who felt like he was drowning. He woke up every day at 6:30 a.m. on the dot to the sound of news alerts. By 7 a.m., he was already stressed out about a political crisis he couldn't control and an email from a client that he hadn't answered. Jerry made just one change: the no screen 60. For the first 60 minutes of his day, the phone stayed in a drawer. Now, week 1, when he did this, he felt anxious. Right? Most of us would. He had what we call phantom vibration syndrome, right? Feeling his legs shake even when the phone wasn't there. Now, week 2, he started noticing the way the light hit his kitchen table. He had a real conversation with his daughter. And then during the first month, his productivity at work skyrocketed. Why? Because he had already won his morning. He entered the office as a leader and not a victim of his inbox. You see, we have a finite amount of decision fatigue. Every choice you make, from what socks to wear to how to phrase a post on social media, which you can spend maybe an hour doing and getting like 2 likes, right? All of this drains your battery. Warren Buffett said that the difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything. Now, if you want to set the tone, you have to learn the art of the relentless no. Is this interruption moving me forward and towards my goals? Is this person's drama my responsibility? Is this urgent task actually important? Statistics show that the average worker is interrupted every 11 minutes. So if you don't build a fortress around your time, the world will happily tear it down. So you need a script. You say, well, why do I need a script? What is this about? You wouldn't walk onto a stage without a script, would you? You need a script. Well, guess what? You're playing a major role in life. And you need a script. You need a script to set the tone. A script will give you these 3 pillars. Here they are. You need these. Number 1, mindfulness. This is the anchor. 5 minutes of silence, 5 minutes of prayer, or 5 minutes of meditation. Now, this actually tells your nervous system, I am in control. And then after mindfulness, you need movement. That's the second thing. This is the ignition. Even 10 minutes of walking or stretching can fulfill this part of the script. It lowers cortisol and it spikes dopamine. And the third thing you need in this script is the big rock. We're going to talk about that in a little bit in more detail. But the big rock, this is the win. Identify the one thing that, if completed, makes the day a success. Do it before you check your first email. Now, I know that's hard, but I need you to do it. Now, when you set the tone for your day, you aren't just helping yourself, you're changing the energy of everyone you encounter. When you are focused and calm, you are a better parent, you're a more present partner, and a more effective, not only leader, but human being. So don't let the unimportant rob you of your potential. The world will try to distract you. It is your job to remain undistractable. So when you end your day, put your phone in a drawer an hour before bed and don't touch it until an hour after you wake up tomorrow. See what happens when you finally meet yourself in the quiet. Now, what I don't want to do is I don't want to make this just about checking your phone. This is about cognitive tunneling. When you wake up and immediately consume news or social media, you are pulling your brain into what we call a reactive state. Every notification releases a tiny bit of dopamine. Now, this sounds good, but it actually creates a craving cycle. By 9 a.m., your brain is already exhausted from seeking the next dopamine hit, leaving no energy for deep creative work. Research from the University of British Columbia found that people who limited their email checks to 3 times a day experienced significantly lower stress than those who checked it constantly. Now, there's an aviation example that I want to give you now that I think is going to be very relevant to you in this conversation. In aviation, there is a sterile cockpit rule. Below 10,000 feet, pilots are forbidden from talking about anything except the flight. Why? Because that is the most critical time. Your first hour, my friends, is your below 10,000 feet. If you're talking about celebrity gossip or a frustrated email from a coworker during your takeoff, you are inviting a crash later on in the day. Now, we need to kill this crazy idea that we can quickly check something and go back to work. Now, I know this sounds crazy because most of us do this and we think it's okay. But every time you switch your attention, you pay a tax. Your brain has to load the rules of the new task and archive the rules of the old one. Research shows that multitasking can reduce productivity as much as 40%. You thought you were really killing it, right? You thought you were really doing it. But as much as 40%, your productivity is reduced. So you really aren't doing two things at once. You're doing two things poorly and making yourself tired in the process. Therefore, your focus is essential. Think of your focus as a flashlight in a dark forest. If you keep swinging the light around to every sound in the bushes, all of the unimportant stuff, right? Or maybe important to you if you're out there in the forest alone and you're hearing sounds, but ultimately it's unimportant, right? If you do this, you'll never see the path in front of you. Now, the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule is critical when we think about this. 80% of your results come from 20% of your activities. Think about that very closely. 80% of your results are actually coming from 20% of the things that you do. But most of us spend the morning doing the 80%, the things that don't yield the results that we want. The busy work, the easy emails, the filing. And by the time we get to the 20% that's going to produce the results, the hard project, the difficult conversation, the creative leap, we are mentally spent. So here's the antidote that I want to give you. It's called the jar of life. You've probably heard this before somewhere. I'm pretty sure you have, but it bears repeating here. A professor once stood before his class with a glass jar. He filled it with big rocks and asked the class if it was full. They said, "Yes, it is full." He then poured in pebbles, then some sand, and then some water. He was able to get those other three elements in that same jar with the big rocks. The lesson that he was trying to teach his class, and what I want us to get today, is that if you put the sand or the unimportant emails or social media in first, there is no room for the big rocks, the things that are going to make a difference. You must schedule the big rocks first and then do the other stuff. Otherwise, the big rocks will never fit. Now, there's a 5-minute rule here as well that I want to share with you. If you are procrastinating on a major task because it feels too big, tell yourself you will do it for just 5 minutes. Now, there's a reason why this is so essential. A psychological phenomenon where our brains remember uncompleted tasks better than completed ones begins to sprout, begins to grow. And once you start anything for the first 5 minutes, your brain then wants to finish it. Unfortunately, when we try this and we try to use willpower, we cannot rely on willpower alone. Willpower is a battery that quickly drains. You must design an environment where distraction becomes difficult. So you need to use visual cues, right? Keep your big rock task visible on your desk before you leave the night before. Also use what I call digital boundaries. Use do not disturb modes as a default on your phone and not as an exception. So to wrap all this up, it's all about the legacy of your days. We often think of our lives as these big, grand stories, but a life is simply a collection of days. If you lose your mornings, you lose your days. If you lose your days, guess what? You lose your life. You have been given a certain number of heartbeats. Do not trade them for a scroll through a stranger's vacation or photos or an argument on the internet. Own your tone. Guard your gates. You are the architect of your morning. So right now, reflect on your life. Are you prioritizing what truly matters? Those big rocks? Are you acting with intention or letting time ultimately slip away? Since we are all due to expire, the question is, what will you do with your life between now and then? I want to thank you for listening today. I'm your host, Corey Kennard.